Hey everybody out there, welcome back to another edition of Advancement Live. My name's Ryan Catherwood. I'm coming to you live from the grounds of the University of Virginia here in beautiful Charlottesville. Advancement Live is part of the HigherEdLive network, which is a series of professional development web shows and podcasts that are also available on HigherEdLive.com as well as on iTunes. I highly encourage you to check out the podcasts, as well as subscribe to the HigherEdLive newsletter, which you can do on the site, HigherEdLive.com, or just wait for the tweet that should appear before you momentarily to follow the link and subscribe to that great newsletter. Also be part of the conversation during the course of our broadcast today by using the HigherEdLive hashtag and ask your questions to today's guests on Twitter. Advancement Live has two fantastic sponsors. I'm going to go ahead and share their logos with you. Advancement Live is brought to you by iModules. iModules software is the leading constituent engagement management provider for educational institutions. iModules delivers an integrated online platform that transforms how institutions strengthen constituent relationships and achieve fundraising success. Advancement Live is also brought to you by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with educational institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. In June, M. Stoner is hosting an in-depth two-part webinar focused on brand strategy. So awesome sponsors, M. Stoner and iModules. You can find a link to the two-part webinar coming at you also on the HigherEdLive Twitter account coming your direction. Okay, so now that we've got our sponsors out of the way, I am thrilled to introduce my first guest, both of my guests actually, because they are my colleagues here at the University of Virginia. So they are right around the hall, and if I yell loud enough, they could probably hear me without actually talking into their microphones. So I'm thrilled to have Kenna Boyd and Heidi Kozik today to chat donor relations and stewardship. Just during the course of our planning for the show, I learned a ton about donor relations and stewardship. These folks are part of a hardworking team here in University Advancement and do some amazing stuff. Kenna is the Associate Director of Donor Relations at the University of Virginia, where she is responsible for stewardship of the university's major donors, alumni, parents, and friends through cultivation, recognition, and engagement events. In addition to managing the Office of University Advancement Events Program, she is responsible for the coordination and compilation of the presidential event proposal and schedule, which is what we're going to talk about first. Kenna, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks.
Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it. I owe you a cup of coffee, both you and Heidi, for being on the program today. Excited to have you. And the first question in our segment has to do with your work with the president of the university, President Teresa Sullivan. Can you talk a little bit about our events involving the president and your part as part of that donor relations strategy?
Sure, absolutely. I'll start with the fact that really our presidential work is our core component. We build around it. So we, in the past, have always looked at the markets where we have a high number of alumni, parents, and friends, where we feel we need to engage those groups, where we have opportunity for development. And then we work with the president's office by putting forward a proposal, asking for her time, outlining why she should go, where she should go, and what we're trying to accomplish. So that's always worked really well. And since President Sullivan's been here, I think we've shown her that we have a great respect for her time. We've prepared her well. We've always given her an audience that is very much ready to hear from her. So what she's done in the last year and a half is she's actually turned over her calendar to us through her staff, and she showed us where she's going for conferences, or if she's on a board and she needs to go sit through a meeting. So we're not only now able to put forward markets where we need her, we're actually able to take advantage of the time that she's on the road, which is a significant amount of time. So that's been a change in strategy that we've really taken advantage of.
Yeah, and you guys do a tremendous job preparing the president, and she's on the road often. How do you guys prepare the president for her events? And you know, the idea behind her presence at these locations is very data-driven, both qualitatively and quantitatively. Can you share a little bit about how you kind of look into the data and are able to decipher a strategy?
Sure, absolutely. So it starts with the beginning, where we prepare a proposal that we put forward to her and her office, and we're really wanting to show her the meat of the material. So we're telling her why we want to be in a certain place, what's the objective, what's our strategy. We're also showing her numbers, the number of alumni in that territory, and it looks like, Ryan, you're showing our proposal here. So basically we outline if we have a specific venue or a host that wants to do the event. But the most important thing, I think, is that grid where we show her in a certain city, and this is Charlotte as an example, how many people are in that market that are alumni, parents, and friends, how many are total donors, how many are 100K plus donors, and then our rating system. And that really helps us, I guess, make a point as to why we need to be in that place. So that's kind of the beginning process. But once we have a calendar set and we're out on the road and we're taking her into the city, we make sure she comes with a briefing book. And we do that probably about a week in advance. And we'll give her briefing materials that have an event summary that kind of tell her where to be, when to be there, remind her of what our objective is. But we also include our guest list, which is our accepts document. And we include everything from the guests' school year, their title, their job title, the business they work for, their level of giving up to that point, their rating level, and then we also include some really detailed prospect bio notes that our prospect research department will produce, typically for a certain giving criteria, so no more than 10 or 15, but that includes information about their children and their family, and it also has things like if their child didn't get admitted into UVA, she needs to know that before she walks in a room. So what we've been able to show her is that we're prepared and that we're preparing her so she never walks into a room surprised.
Yeah, and so the idea is she has this level of preparedness, even a study guide, if you will, right? And it's the best sort of information we have about our donors. What is your sort of take, or what is your understanding as the objectives for her presence during the course of those events? So she's got those folks that she wants to meet with. Is that sort of, does she try to touch all those folks?
So we have kind of a 2 or 3 prong approach. It depends on the city and the number of people there. But really her objective is it's the face. It's the face, it's the name. We've taken many faculty members out. We take our provost, we take some of the deans will travel. But at the end of the day, the president is the one who is the face of the university, and that's where we see the biggest return on investment. You have higher attendance rates, you have higher show rates, so that's where we know that we get a huge return. And so the number one objective is to put her forward. Number 2 is to put her voice behind the initiatives that we've outlined. So if we're fundraising for scholarships or we're fundraising for the Rotunda, for example, having her talk about why that's a priority, that's golden. That's what we need her to do with that audience. The other thing that we do to use her time wisely in market, if we have a principal prospect or a high-level donor prospect, we'll actually set up some time with her to individually meet with that person. It helps us to be strategic in using her time, but also to get her face time with those individual donors.
Yeah, and at your individual events, particularly the ones involving the president, you do have some of our highest level donors, the folks who are the real movers and shakers in our donor community and in general. Mm-hmm. And so in some respects, your work does intersect with the principal relationship managers in development. Is that sort of a fair statement? And how do you work alongside those frontline fundraisers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something I've seen shifting the most over the last couple years, and more so in the last year. We are intersecting with our principal relationship development officers. The way we manage our group, both Heidi and I both with donor relations, is we look at it from a very client service perspective. We feel that our development officers that we work with are our client as well as our donors and alumni. So we really come to the table with the objective of what are we all trying to accomplish as a team. So in particular with our principal relationship program, over the last couple years, I've been given the opportunity to work with our top, I would say 2 to 5%. So about 5 or 6 donors that we've been able to sit down with them and outline what is it that they're trying to accomplish with their financial and their philanthropic dollars. And then we look at the programs and we try to customize things for them. So whether they be events or if they'd like to set up particular meetings with faculty, learn more about how they can have more of an impact, we try to navigate that for them. So we're really trying to enrich that relationship with the university and give it some depth versus just a transactional relationship. So it's ongoing, and at this point I have probably 5 or 6 individuals that I've worked with, and their programs are recurring over the last couple years, and they kind of evolve as their needs evolve. One of them is kind of starting to peter out. It's appropriate. It's where we need to be right now. Whereas the other one is really ramping up because I think this donor has seen what value we are adding to the dollars that they're putting in.
That's great. And in our pre-show discussion, we talked a little bit about the idea of how your work is customized in this respect with the needs, the priorities of the donor. You feel this is such an accurate statement as far as how it's important and from what perhaps other institutions are doing in their donor relations department? Is this new space within donor relations?
You know, it's new space for me as well as conversationally. I mean, I've put a lot of feelers out just to ask other universities, what are you doing? Is this, I mean, because it is new territory and you have to walk a fine line between catering too much because you don't want to not deliver. It's not about not being overly accessible. I want to be accessible. I want our team to be accessible and to be helpful, but we also have to manage expectations. There's only so much 2 or 3 people can do as a unit as well as doing all of your other work. So that's the balance I've been trying to find in this new territory, is carving out time to do this customized relationship work, because I firmly believe we're seeing our biggest return on investment with this customized work, but also balancing it with the fact that we do 70 plus, sometimes 100 events a year with massive amount of donors, alumni, parents, and friends. You have to find a balance between the two. So that's where I feel like I am looking for those other universities that are doing this, and I'm not seeing a lot, but I would love to learn more.
Yeah, and hopefully some folks who get a chance to watch this rebroadcast or who are watching live can chime in with some of their thoughts on donor relations strategy. And moving into sort of another thread, Kenna, we had talked a little bit about how campaign donor relations strategy perhaps differs a little bit. And can you talk a little bit about where we are here at UVA, the phases of the campaign and sort of how we are in an interim period between campaigns? What are the implications there?
Sure. I'll talk about kind of where we've been. We've just completed a $3 billion campaign, which we announced March, April, May. So it's a little bit of a blur for us right now. So you kind of end a campaign, and while we were in that campaign, it was all about the initial vetting of the campaign objectives, and then once you've kind of looked at your objectives, it's analyzing which markets need to hear from you first, where do we need to roll this campaign out in the initial phases, and then it's the public launch, and you have to put a lot of time and effort against the public launch of a campaign, and quite frankly, you've already been in it for a couple of years. And then you move into kind of the phase where it's the true fundraising work is taking place, and you really need to have kind of a broad spectrum of events. You need to be doing these large, what we call all-comer events, where you're bringing everybody in the room in a particular market so that they can really engage with each other. They can hear a bit about what the university's objectives are relative to the campaign, but also to higher ed in general. And then you also need to do some of these individual dinners. We call them Jeffersonian dinners. Thomas Jefferson had the concept of getting 12 to 13 people around a table with one topic in mind, and really having a deep conversation. There's rules to it. You can't overtalk another person. You have to listen while an individual is speaking. So we did a couple of those events in the campaign, and those went over very well. And then, like I mentioned as well, our individual visits. So that's kind of where we've come from. We are in not silent phase, but we're in interim between 2 campaigns. So what's been really helpful for us in this quiet phase is that our administration outlined the 3 primary initiatives for us. So for us right now, it's faculty support, it's scholarship for need, and then also our historic preservation, so our rotunda, what we call our Jeffersonian Grounds Initiative. So it's really helpful for me from an event perspective, I think for Heidi from stewardship perspective, to have these 3 things that you can start to build around. So now what we're doing is we're taking our faculty on the road. They're the ones talking about these 3 initiatives because they're the ones who really can speak to faculty support and why we need to do more of our financial support for our students and what the university's grounds really mean to them and why they're here. We still take the president out with those faculty, but she really lets them be the star.
That's an exciting part of where we are right now, having the marching orders on the three priorities. And as we move forward over the next couple of years, of course, we'll be ramping up a new campaign. So what do you think the strategy will be, or imagine it to be, as we end this interim phase and begin to roll out what will be introducing the new campaign?
Well, I mean, I think I'll speak hypothetically. I mean, my thought would be that we have these three initiatives that we're really putting a lot of effort around. I would hope that we do a full analysis of where are we in those three initiatives, how much further do we need to go. But I imagine that our administrative team and the president, they'll really craft what's this next campaign about. I mean, it's our bicentennial campaign, so I think that'll be a strong foundation. But we're really going to need to vet what's the foundation. What are we going to be putting forward? So again, vetting the objective and the strategy, and then we have probably a top 10 market list where we know that we need to get in and sit in a room, boardroom style, with some of our key volunteers. And that doesn't just mean our higher end donors. That means the people that are very invested in the University of Virginia culture and what we mean to them, and get them around a table and have them really talk about what that campaign strategy, how that feels to them, how does that sound to them. So get that feedback, come back, really tighten up the campaign objectives, and then roll it out nationally.
It's exciting times to be here, having just started at the university and to watch the $3 billion campaign come to a close, and to be here to watch this interim period and then ramp up for a new campaign. It's really a special time to work at the University of Virginia. But Kenna, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to talk to Heidi a little bit about stewardship, and then our last question will be both you and Heidi talking about where we go from here.
Great, thanks.
Hey, Heidi, how are you today?
Good.
Fantastic.
Well.
Now it is time for a discussion about stewardship, and I'm pleased to introduce my colleague Heidi Kozik. Heidi is the Assistant Director of Donor Relations and Stewardship at University Advancement here at the University of Virginia. Heidi oversees the stewardship program for the university's donors, alumni, parents, and friends, which includes acknowledgement letters, endowment reporting, in memory of and in honor of reporting, and holiday cards, customized stewardship efforts, and the Lawn Society, the university's highest level giving society. Heidi has been with Donor Relations since 2005 and serving as Assistant Director for just the last 2 years and doing amazing work. Heidi, and we're getting the chance to prepare our show for today. We started off the idea of how customization is really important with respect to a donor stewardship strategy. And here at UVA, of course, no different. Can you tell folks about our stewardship strategy and the stewardship books you guys create?
Absolutely. So Kenna touched on it briefly, working with the principal donors. So Donor Relations works with the Principal Relationship Development Office to select book candidates. So people are who've been really involved and engaged with the university, and so we essentially do research on that donor. So we go back and look at all their involvement as student years, if they've been involved in any service boards at UVA, and as well as their philanthropy and the impact of their philanthropy. So we create these customized stewardship books that really detail photos, quotes, stories, a variety of pieces that anything we can get our hands on, essentially, that involves those donors. And we compile it into a photo book. We use Booksmart program, which is from blurb.com. And
nice plug for the blurb.com folks.
Unintentional.
That's great.
But that one really has been the best templates and services that we can use. But anyway, we compile the books. We have, everyone who has any type of relationship with that donor here review it. So development officers, folks in the office. The books are given as a thank you to the donor. Really, those donors who have been involved for years with the university. The book is usually delivered by the president or another high-level administrator. We've done about, 11 of them. They're pretty intensive. They take 6 to 8 weeks to put together. We do them in addition to our normal tasks of, acknowledgement letters and other reporting. So it really is spending time at the libraries, pulling out old yearbooks, scanning pictures. If the donor was on the student newspaper, the Cavalier Daily, for example, we would pull articles from the Cavalier Daily, scan those in. They either written or if they were featured in them, if they were played a sport. So these really are very custom books for each donor. We also include registration cards, so cards that the donor had filled out as a student their first, second, third, fourth years here. And so those were great finds when we realized we had those. People are really surprised to see that the university has kept that for so many years, because a lot of our books have been for the 1950s graduates. And so that's kind of a really special token for them.
And what an amazing piece to give folks to say thank you and to develop and further enhance that emotional connection back to the university. I mean, that's amazing stuff, and some really individual labor that goes into each one of those books. I can imagine why that you only do ones when really important occasions, because that is a significant amount of time. And for important folks around here. And so what are the stewardship components for first-time donors? So we've got the folks who are in the hopper and are giving at a high level, as opposed to folks who are new. How are those donors treated differently or separately?
So Donor Relations started doing the first-time donor program in 2010, and it started out as a quarterly email that a staffer here took on as a part of our responsibilities. And since then, it's evolved, beginning fiscal year 14, into a monthly email and a card. So University Advancement Donor Relations, we're just kind of one development office at UVA among several, and so we really work in conjunction with those offices to do all of our work. So for the first-time donor, we report on select gifts. So for like School of Medicine, for example, the health systems, they have their own reporting, so we are reporting on a subset of group. But typically the first-time donor program, it includes either an email, if they have an email in our system, or if they don't have an email, we send them a card. And for fiscal year 14, the email was segmented into 4 groups. So for an alum, a non-alum, a student, and then donors and alum to the University of Virginia's College at Wise. So we started to segment those messages and send email communication specific to whatever group they fell under. The hard copy card is the same message for everyone. For the card, for the email, that's been going on since 2010. It says the card is new. But let me see, sorry. A little lost here.
Oh, that's all good. So you were talking about in addition to the email and card?
Into the card, yes. So for the new components of the program for fiscal year 14, we segmented the email, we started doing the card, and then we started incorporating those recipients into New Traditions, which is an electronic quarterly newsletter. So those folks who receive that e-newsletter for 2 fiscal years. And then we also started incorporating those recipients into other acknowledgement programs. So, for example, students write handwritten notes to donors who support need-based scholarships. And then recently, staff has started writing notes to students who support a variety of allocations, whichever the initiative might be. Right now, need-based scholarships. So we've just come out of 2 different note writing events. One for students that was held in April, thanking donors who gave to need-based scholarships, and then staff who wrote notes to students who gave to need-based scholarships.
And we just had a fun pizza party with note writing, and it was a great little system, and we had a good time as a team helping out donor relations, acknowledging scholarship gifts that were made from students. And so, gift acknowledgement is a huge piece of the puzzle as it comes to stewardship. And how does donor relations make sure that sort of the same letters and the same language aren't going out to the same person more than once?
Well, I think the 2 things that we try to do as far as our acknowledgement letters are to make them personal and timely. So kind of following up with Kenna talking about the president and the use of the president at events, we have a stewardship coordinator in our office that her primary responsibility is writing acknowledgement letters from the president. And so, again, a labor-intensive process. We have a report that she runs that pulls gifts at a certain level. So we write gifts from the president at a certain level, and then at a lower level from the senior vice president for university advancement. So Casey pulls this report, and she really looks at the donor's record to see where the gift is allocated and what they've received in the past and how often. So she crafts the letter based on allocation and also based on the donor. We have an associate in our office who reviews that letter and then looks back at previous year's text to ensure that we're not sending out duplicate language. What we really try to do is make sure that the text is specific to the allocation, so the donor knows where and the impact of their gift. But also we try to put a personal touch in there for the donor from the president. So if the donor serves on the board of visitors or another board at one of the schools, we may reference that. If she's recently seen a donor at an event, we sometimes reference that. We have recently started, the letter writer has really kept in mind the different areas, the cities where the president has visited, and if gifts come in from donors who live in those areas, checked back to see if that person attended an event. We can make that reference. Also, graduation just happened, so if the donor has a son or daughter who's about to graduate, and she's aware of that, we make a reference to that as well. In addition to our office, those letters are sent out to the different schools and units whose areas referenced in the letter, and they review them as well. So we really try to make sure that it's as accurate as possible, but also that it's as personal to the donor as it can be.
Great. And one of the things that, and we touched on this a little bit already, but getting students, faculty, and staff involved in the stewardship process here at UVA. Can you talk a little bit about a couple of the things? I know we sort of touched on handwriting notes in general, but a really important piece of the puzzle to get everybody involved here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the student note writing has been the most successful piece of that. So we've tried to do one per semester. So we started in fall of 13, I think. I'm sorry, spring 2013. So we had spring, fall, and this past spring. And each time has been more successful. Of the three sessions have been for donors who give to need-based scholarships. They were the most successful in relation to the students connecting with the reason for writing. We did have a note writing event this past fall where we thanked some of our senior volunteer leaders for was a university advancement committee, and the students had a hard time connecting to that because they weren't really aware of the board, and kind of so we had kind of explained like what the board does and all that. So the need-based scholarships has definitely been the most successful piece of the student note writing. As far as getting staff involved, this past spring we did the staff note writing event where we thanked students who gave to need-based scholarships, and staff were more than happy to do that. A lot of the gifts are kind of the lower level gifts, and so they're not necessarily pulled into other acknowledgement letter criteria. Either from the president or senior vice president for university advancement, or even the first-time donor program. So it's been a really good way to kind of catch those folks who don't fall into one of the other categories and also get a handwritten note.
And it was fun doing it too. Switching gears slightly, can you talk a little bit about the consolidated honor roll and what do you think the impact is in having a donor's name appear on a list? I know that's something that I think a lot of folks think about is making sure that you acknowledge publicly in that sort of way.
Mm-hmm. So the consolidated honor roll is really the first time we've ever done this. The University Advancement has 3 giving societies: the Lawn Society, the Cornerstone Society, and the Rotunda Society, and each of those is managed by another department. Donor Relations manages the Lawn Society. And so this year, what is a year that everyone does a publication. So donors have the possibility of receiving multiple publications in the same year. And so we got together and decided to do a consolidated honor roll that features all 3 given societies and their honor roll lists. What we hope to do is increase membership across multiple societies. There are thousands of members within each society. Several hundred are members of all 3. Several hundred more are members of at least 2. And so we're hoping to really showcase all 3 and increase membership. Also, I'm well aware and I respect all opinions on both sides of whether or not an honor roll is the best use of time or recognition. But for our purposes, from what we've seen and kind of heard back from our donors, they do appreciate it. And it's not just a honor roll. We also include impact stories. So the bulk of it is, where the money goes and how it impacts the university. And we also do some donor profiles. So the publication is scheduled to go out in the fall. We are including a survey with the publication this year to see kind of the donor's response to receiving kind of a consolidated honor roll versus 3 separate honor rolls throughout the year.
Awesome. And so before we answer and bring Kenna back in for the question about print versus paper, which I think is a really great topic to end on, can you talk a little bit about the greatest opportunity for stewardship in the digital space? I know a lot of our viewers are interested in that, and we were going to show some of the websites we've been working on.
Mm-hmm. So in kind of following up to the talk about the consolidated honor roll, with that, we are creating a website with the Plans Giving Office and the Office of Annual Giving to feature the 3 societies. I think what you're seeing right now is the Lawn Society website that was created in conjunction with the Lawn Society Directory in 2012. And so a website will be created for this one that really showcases all 3. In addition to that, we have the Endowments website, which features information about endowed funds at the University of Virginia. Professorships, lectureships, scholarships, the variety of funds. Information for this is included in the annual Rector and Visitors Endowment Report mailing, which goes out in the fall. And this website was created as a supplement to the larger we mail to approximately 950 people. And so those packets include a card that has information about the donors' funds and his login and password information, so they can go on and access that information electronically. So of that group, slowly but surely, we're hoping to win people over and get them to choose electronic communication. We have had about 10 that have asked to stop receiving the publication hard copy report and then to move to the electronic copy. We also do a lower level mailing. It's a 1-page letter from the Senior Vice President for University Advancement, thanking them for their endowed fund gifts and then directing them to the website for more information to find out how their fund has impacted the university. That's about 300 people, approximately, give or take, and that is strictly, electronic. The letter goes hard copy, but the information they can find is electronic. So we've received good feedback on both. We are looking to revamp the Endowments website this year. We've had it alive for a couple of years now, and as we kind of see how the end user interacts with the website as far as a donor, students going there looking for scholarship, and how to apply for scholarships, people coming to the site to find out how to create information, or to find information to create an endowed fund. So we're revising those sites and kind of thinking about how the end user interacts with them.
Yeah, and it's fun to take a run around the sites and learn what we've got. And this has been a tremendous learning opportunity for me, as I hadn't had the chance to explore some of the sites that you guys are working on. Thanks so much, Heidi, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
And I'd love to bring Kenna back in for our last topic of conversation, which is a good one to end on. I think everybody has the notion that it's a good idea to save money, right? And that makes an awful lot of sense. So the big question in that respect is print versus paper as a component of event invitations or anything handwritten, Does it move the needle in a positive way for registrations or donor retention? Should we use paper instead of electronic communications? And obviously, paper is expensive, and e is not. So I thought I'd let you guys talk about some of your findings.
Sure, absolutely. Heidi, do you want me to jump in first?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
All right, so I'll talk a little bit about our rationale for paper versus electronic, because we use both. So Ryan, sorry, that's not the cookie cutter clean answer of, oh, one is better than the other. I don't know that that's what you expected, but both is the answer, and it depends. That's also the answer. So I'll kind of start where we do our analysis. We look at the type of event that we're trying to put forward. If it's something that is for our higher level donors and we're asking a bit more of their time, we do find that sending a paper invitation is much more respected. It makes more of an impact to pull something out of an envelope to put in front of you. So that's something that we do know of our donors. They want to see something in paper. But they also appreciate where we are finding some efficiencies. So where we have found those efficiencies are on the save the date. A lot of times we're doing those electronically, as well as on our follow-up. So a couple of years ago, we were doing follow-up letters from a presidential level, and they were pretty generic in that it was the same message. The president would write a personalized note on numerous notes, but we did get feedback that we'd rather not receive a letter that is obviously just 2 sentences, probably canned. What we decided to do is we send an electronic follow-up after every single event, not just to the people that attended, but to everyone invited. And that's something that we're testing, we've done over the entire spring, and we're going to look at the analytics this summer, because what we can see is the number of people that open that email, and it typically is going to come from a local host within that community. So we have a lot of key volunteers that are alumni or parents of the university, and the email will come directly from them, and it'll have their signature. We'll get them scan their signature in. So it's very personalized, but what we include in there is a message of, it was great to see you if you were there. Thank you for coming. If you weren't able to join us, here's the information that we covered, and we'll include 2 or 3 different links to talk about whether it's our scholarship program or the faculty support or historic preservation. And what's interesting is we can see on the back end what's resonating with people if they go and click on all 3 links, or if they go directly to the Give Now link. So we're going to look at the analytics behind that. So that's where I think electronic is so important. But I don't think you can lose the quality touch with an invitation. Where we have found electronic invitations are okay are for our larger all-comer type events. So if we have an email address, we are going to email them an invitation. Give them the opportunity to very quickly respond. Those seem to be working very well. We do see a higher return on our attendance rates when we are electronically reminding people to attend. So we'll send 2 or 3 days out looking forward to seeing you type email. And a lot of times we'll get a note back from people saying, oh, my plans have changed. That helps us manage our numbers on the back end. But it also, we've heard from people saying, I had kind of forgotten, thanks for reminding us. So we're really using a hybrid version of electronic and paper. But at the end of the day, you can't beat a beautiful paper invitation. And there are some cost-saving measures that you can employ there, but we'll save that for another day.
And I think you could definitely have an interesting show about those direct mail pieces themselves, right?
Yes.
In part of our pre-show discussion, we actually talked about one that you had received in the mail, and how that particular piece itself might not have been the type that we would have sent out for our constituency.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Ryan, I think in particular you brought that up. I think the difference is what we don't do out of our group. None of our mailings look like a direct mail piece. They aren't slick. They are typically not postcards. They're always in an envelope, and they're typically on some sort of paper that has an invitation look to it. They're not always folded or scored, so we do find some cost-saving measures. But I will say that we get, I think, a higher return when we are showing a little bit of a softer look, not a commercial look.
Makes sense. Heidi, any closing thoughts on paper versus print?
Well, we do the handwritten notes for the students and the staff note writing, and the presidents and senior vice presidents of university advancement letters are printed and with a hand signature. We find the best return on the first-time donor acknowledgement letters and the letters we send electronically from the Senior Vice President for University Advancement. Those responses come from a live inbox, and so we, in the first-time donor especially, we ask the recipient to reply to us and let us know what inspired them to give. So we've gotten some really touching stories from either parents who this is their child who's a student here, or something that something that's happened at UVA that really touched someone, and it made them want to support that fund in particular, and that their communications office has actually reached out to those recipients and asked if we can use their stories in different print communication. So it's actually kind of been a win-win for all of us, from the donor relations point of view, but also from communications point of view, that we actually get live responses back from the recipients, of the donors, and we get to exchange in a conversation with them about what made them give their gift.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the areas of our business that I'm most excited to learn more about is using the web space and using those appeals not just for money themselves, but for the stories, and to be able to craft specific messages behind the donor behind the donor intentions on giving. Why were they compelled to give, and how does our messaging and our storytelling connect with them to do it again? But Kenna and Heidi, thank you so much for joining me today on Advancement Live. It was a great show, and I learned a lot from you guys, and I looked forward to doing some more work with you both in the future. But for now, wrapping it up from Charlottesville, my name's Ryan Catherwood, and you should tune back into Advancement Live Tuesdays 1 o'clock. And I believe the next show, my colleague Andrew Gosin up at Cornell University will be back middle of June, June 10th, I believe, for a new edition of Advancement Live. And I will be back on the end of June on the 24th with another show. Stay tuned for details on those, and thank you so much for taking the time to watch Advancement Live. Bye-bye now.